Hey, well, welcome everyone. And I think that Leah already welcomed you, but let me just restate the welcome. And just gonna read the um, the COVID announcement. I believe that that's a requirement that we have to do here. So, welcome to the December meeting of the Equity Advisory Committee. I want to acknowledge that COVID-19 is causing us to alter our usual procedures, and we have invited residents of the region to participate in this meeting virtually. The Met Council has determined it is not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person committee meeting due to the ongoing public health crisis. Accordingly, Met Council members and others will participate in this meeting via phone or other electronic means, and this Equity Advisory Committee meeting will be conducted under Minnesota statutes, sections 13D.021. um, few quick reminders about WebEx and the virtual meeting process. We always ask folks to remain muted unless speaking. If you can share your name before speaking, uh, we will do roll call if there's any vote that needs to be taken. And the chat function, if always, if possible, should be used for technical issues as opposed to conversations because those need to be public. And you can use the raise hand feature on the chat on the WebEx site. If that doesn't work, you can always speak up and ask for space to make your comment or your question. And again, a reminder that this meeting is recorded and will be made available online. And Lila will be monitoring the chat, and you can reach out to her if you're having technical issues, and she will put her cell phone number in the chat so you can reach out to her. Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. And
Yeah.
now I'm going to call us to order. So thank you for the preliminary information. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, December 21st. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:07. And Lila, will you do a roll call for us?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Sorry, took me a moment to get here. All right. Lenice Block. Nicole Ellis McGregor. Leah Goldstein Moses.
Present.
Francisco Gonzalez.
Here.
Nicholas Jenkins. Chai Lee. Michael Lucini. Edward McDonald.
Here.
Julia Miller. T. Way.
Here.
Brianne Rothstein.
Present.
Sarah Rudolph. Mohammed Sheikh.
Here.
Nalima Sitate Munine. Philip Sterner. Anita Urvina Davis. All right, that's the roll call, and we do not have a quorum.
All right, thanks for doing that, Lila. We are going to hold on approving the minutes until we do have a quorum. So we will wait on that. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Francisco for our subcommittee parts.
Thank you. And this is the space that we have for reports by our subcommittee members. And we have are you gonna do yours, Leah, or shall we got the transportation subcommittee first?
I can do the operations subcommittee first, and then we can go into the others.
Okay, Leah, let's do that.
Okay. The operations subcommittee has two things that we've been working on in this last month. And I invite my other subcommittee members to jump in at the end if I've forgotten anything or if you want to add some additional detail or reflections. The first thing we've been working on is navigating processes related to the resolution passed by the EAC 2 meetings ago. And Francisco and I had a meeting with Regional Administrator Bogey about the resolution, talked about the process for an audit of operations, and provided some sample RFPs and reports that had been created in other jurisdictions, other agencies to consider. And we're now waiting for action back by the regional administrator. The other thing our operations subcommittee worked on is an idea for bringing together contractors, vendors, businesses, and Met Council staff so that they could get to know each other for the purpose of increasing contracting by targeted group businesses, by businesses that have been historically underrepresented and currently underrepresented in the Met Council's work. And we have an idea that we'd like to bring forward to you later in the meeting if there is time for discussion. So I'll hold on that idea. But we want to talk a little bit more about that, bringing vendors and Met Council staff together and get some input from the full EAC. Edward or Mohammed, is there anything you'd like to add?
I do not. I have nothing.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. See, any of the folks from the transportation subcommittee I would like to give an update? I think that are you on that transportation subcommittee?
Yes, and we have not met yet. I need to connect with them soon, so I will have an update for our next meeting.
Okay. And any of the folks from the affordable housing subcommittee that would like to share an update?
Hi, this is Brianne, and Edward is also here today as a member of the subcommittee too, so feel free to add anything I missed, Edward. We met on December 8th as a subcommittee with staff from Community Development, Lisa Barajas, the Director of Community Development, and Tara Beard, who is LCDA Manager. And we talked about the LHIA program. Had a quite interesting conversation with staff on that. And so in terms of our memo, we kind of outlined our memo with them and went through it, and then had a series of follow-up emails back and forth with staff. The next action item for the LHIA program is the Community Development Committee. I believe is on February 7th, and then it will be considered the pilot, the LHIA pilot, local housing incentives account, affordable homeownership pilot will be brought to the full Met Council for approval on February 17th. So we've been trying to work with staff to incorporate our comments where feasible with regard to the program guidelines and the eligibility criteria, and then just kind of pushing back on program design that runs counter to the memo that we wrote. So stay tuned on that. The other piece of information for the committee is that update is that we are going to try to meet on a standing meeting. We're just working out when that will be, but I've proposed the second Wednesday at 3 p.m., 3:30 p.m. So trying to kind of split the daytime hours and the afternoon, evening hours a little bit there, finding that that's the best time for our subcommittee. We are a small but mighty committee. So if anyone has interest, or maybe the new members have interest or love some new energy or some additional energy, maybe is a better way to say it, on the committee. We also want to work on our next big item is to facilitate discussion about federal housing dollars coming down through the state and the Met Council and potentially even to local units of government, and how those dollars, billions of dollars, can be leveraged. So coordinating a meeting with the intergovernmental relations folks at the federal level of Met Council to learn as much as we can about the Met Council's role in that federal housing money coming down. So Edward, did I miss anything?
No, you were very succinct. I'm impressed with your recall. I'm just kidding, but no, you did an excellent job.
I have my notes here, Edward. So otherwise I'd be like, what? And I actually did like consult them before this meeting, because otherwise I would have been like, now where were we with all this? So thanks.
Excellent. Any questions from any of the folks for the presenters from the subcommittee? No? Okay. Thank you. So next on our agenda, we will have a discussion about transit equity led by Metro Transit's Equity Senior Manager, Celina Martina, who's joining us now from beautiful Argentina as we speak. So please welcome Celina. Bienvenida, Celina.
Gracias, Councilmember Gonzalez. Thank you so much, Councilmember Gonzalez, Chair Leah, and committee members. My name is Celina Martina, and I'm the Senior Manager for Equity and Inclusion at Metro Transit. I've been in my role for a little bit over 5 months. And thank you for allowing me to present some of the work that we are doing. I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint. So bear with me just a moment. I'll make sure that I share. I have some video embedded in my PowerPoint, so I want to make sure that the audio will be smooth. All right. Hopefully you can see what I'm sharing.
It looks great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much. So today again, thank you for giving me time in your agenda to share a little bit about the work that Metro Transit is doing to adopt a transit equity statement. And I want to talk a little bit about how that this exercise and this action item is aligning to the strategic plan, as well as going over the process and the timeline of adopting that transit equity statement. And at the end of my presentation, I have discussion questions that I really would love your input and feedback and your thoughts as we continue to move this process along. So that's a little bit of the agenda for my presentation today. So you may be really familiar with our strategic plan, but I would like to go over at a high level. So to provide some context about why adopting a transit equity is aligned to the vision of our strategic plan, that is, together we can become stronger and better. Our strategic plan was adopted about I would say the summer of this year, after looking at data and collecting information from our internal and external stakeholders, our writers, primarily our staff, operators, the equity and inclusion team, and leadership really gather all that input and put together a very I would say aggressive, because it has a lot of items and action items and milestones, strategic plan that contains 5 outcomes that go from looking into how we expand the system with our capital improvements and investments, to examining that our service is safe, so how our safety and security is conducted, and how it interface with our customer experience. Also looking at how our Metro Transit system and service is reliable and easy to use. So how we make adjustments and build a strong ridership. Our goal number 5 is making sure that our region becomes more environmentally sustainable. And so what is the role of transit that to not impact negatively our environment. And finally, our goal number 5 is how does Metro Transit becomes or stays a great place to work and build a career. And those 5 outcomes that has, as you can imagine, several action steps, are only going to be achieved if we look at the 4 core elements. And core element number 1, which I'm the executive sponsor of, is how do we meaningful advance equity inside our organization and in the region. So how can we apply equity lenses to our decision making and practice. But it also has 3 more core elements and how we achieve those outcomes that I shared with you earlier, that go from effective communication to be financial stewards of our resources, and evaluate performance. It's important that we use data and we continue to use that data to evaluate and provide continuous improvements and innovate. So as you see in the slide, one of the direct action items of core element 1, which is equity, is to build and invest in organizational practice or practices that are critical to equitable processes and outcomes. And we know in equity work that when we say equity and when we ask people to define equity, they may all have great thoughts, or can Google equity and can come up with a valid definition. However, having a shared definition and understanding of equity or transit equity is something that we all need to collectively work on. So that has been kind of my first task as I joined Metro Transit, is to lead Metro Transit to adopt a shared definition of transit equity. And I think it's important that I emphasize that we're not trying to define transit equity as to, publish in a journal of literature or something like that, but we are trying to really arrive to a shared understanding where all members of Metro Transit, staff, leadership, etc., and riders and stakeholders outside Metro Transit can really feel like it represents the work that we need to do to advance equity inside and outside the region. So with that, I'd like to show you the timeline of this exercise of adopting transit equity statement. We began, a group of staff in the equity and inclusion team began with the literature review and drafting, and I'll share a little bit more about that that practice and what we have done in October. And right now we are really engaging and taking the draft and the inputs and feedback from several teams, areas within Metro Transit department, including the police department, including leadership, operators, rail, garage. So I've been doing presentations myself, my team, and and in meetings, in different meetings. We've been able to do in early November some in-person drop-ins in some of our facilities, and also provide a way for people to participate online. So we have a MetNet form that we created so people can still give us their input if they, if they rather do that in writing. With the hope that in late January, we'll have a final draft of transit equity statement that leadership can adopt. And really the exercise of adopting a shared understanding it doesn't end in January. It continues in year 2022, where we, will provide trainings, info sessions, and continue to check that that statement is still reflective of our thoughts and collective views on how we see transit equity in our transit system, as well as will inform, our follow-up practices, which are, developing tools to assess equity in the way we provide service, in the way we make decisions around budget, hiring, etc. So, and I also want to say that, what I say in my presentations, that what we knew about equity work 10 years ago has evolved. And we know that, what we are going to adopt this year will have to continuously be reviewed on, on a regular basis to make sure that it's still relevant and it reflects the values and the collective views of Metro Transit and its stakeholders. So I'd like to spend some time in the exercise that we of the literature review and draft, because I think it's important to know where, who are we looking up to, where are we getting the information. So we know that adopting a transit equity or any equity statement is not a new thing for Met Council, neither Metro Transit. So we do have current policies and documents and statements and resolutions that define equity for us. So we looked at the equity policy that the Office of Equal Opportunity owns, and that is how is the equity is defined in that policy. We also looked at the Thrive MSP 2040 equity outcome. And again, looking at those two internal documents as well as our practices, checking with the equity change team. But also we look outside Met Council into, MnDOT is developing their multimodal transportation plan for the state. And they are, they have done a similar work, adopting a working definition for transportation equity. And I'll show that later in a new slide. We also review scholar articles that define or tell us a little bit more about transportation equity, transit justice. And, from Pereira is an author, and researcher from Brazil, Karner from the University of Austin, Texas. We also look at, transit-centered publications and best practices, as well as consulted with peer agencies and did a review of their equity platforms. So maybe this is not new to you, but MnDOT, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, is again adopting or defining transportation equity for the multimodal transportation plan. And this is from their, fall 2021. Again, this was still in draft. So they haven't, I believe, to my knowledge, released the final statement. But this is, what they're after engagement with the state. So not only MnDOT staff, but also community partners. This is how they definition of transportation equity is. I'll leave you with that for a moment so you can read. And part of our literature review again is looking at best practices and really understanding the past. So I like to, I like you to watch this. It's a 9-minute video, but I think it's important to show it here, not only for you as a committee, but also, our potential viewers in the region of this meeting, which is a public meeting. Hopefully it'll help us understand better why we need to adopt a shared definition. I'll play it right now. Hopefully the audio works.
I think racism in any public space, when you have power and you have folks without power, you see its ugly head.
Racism is kind of embedded in our understandings of the way institutions work.
When we talk about white comfort, we're talking about the difference between the quality of a commuter bus or even a BRT versus a neighborhood bus.
In the United States, race has profoundly shaped public transit. The racial stratification of many transit systems today can be traced to the historical moment when these agencies were created. In the 1960s and 70s, many transit systems were on the verge of collapse, following the mass exodus of white Americans from cities to suburbs.
There was a real crisis in terms of seeing the existing transit in the United States feeling like it was on the verge of extinction.
At the same time, there was a growing awareness that highways built after World War II had failed to solve congestion and that suburban residents needed a transportation alternative.
Essentially, a deal got made to say, we're going to put these things together and we're going to create a transit agency which will both rescue our current transit system and then build new transit to serve as an alternative to that congestion.
Transit riders at the time were increasingly Black and brown city residents. The target audience for congestion relief was largely white suburbanites.
In people's minds, each of these missions sort of had their own target audience, and that difference had a real racial dynamic to it.
Notions about who those riders are and the quality they deserve continue to inform transit operations today. It's often expressed in terms of captive and choice riders. You can also think of it as planning for white comfort. Where do we see these disparities show up in modern transit systems? Most prominently in transit amenities, service quality, and policing strategies.
There's a clear difference between the amenities we encounter in communities experiencing disparity versus communities that have been more historically privileged.
Building a commuter rail system, the expectation is that every single stop is going to have shelters, every single stop is going to have seating. And then when you look at the local bus network in that same city, you see that some of the stops are just a sign and nothing else.
At U.S. transit agencies that operate both bus and rail service, bus facilities get far less investment than rail facilities, less than 1/10 as much spending on a per trip basis.
The systems which tend to be the highest percentage low-income riders and the highest percentage people of color are the system which get the lowest quality amenities.
This non-approach to bus stops really comes down to racism and neglect.
In 2014, Minneapolis's Metro Transit was criticized for expanding light rail to the suburbs without improving the bus experience. In response, the agency created the Better Bus Stop program.
They specifically funneled investments to Black and brown communities based on recommendations from riders in those neighborhoods.
This program added over 135 shelters in racially concentrated areas of poverty. In these communities, roughly 2/3 of bus boardings are now at stops with shelters, similar to the rate of the whole system. Disparities in service quality are another legacy of racism in transit planning. Many commuter rail agencies formed at the height of white flight and continue to operate in ways that exclude Black and brown riders.
The genesis of commuter rail systems is really narrowly defining who a commuter is. So often that is white collar, often white workers who are upper income, who work a 9-to-5 job.
This pattern shows up in nearly every U.S. city with a commuter rail system, but is particularly pronounced in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago.
You really have a bifurcated system in some places where poor folks are taking a bus to another bus when there is a stop in their community, but the schedule doesn't align with their lives and with their work, or the prices are too high.
In Chicago, Metra's expensive fares and infrequent service have left many Southside residents behind. Riders who can afford a trip on Metra can access 35,000 more jobs than riders who can only afford a trip on CTA.
Metra service has really been designed around making sure that people from suburban areas can zoom into downtown Chicago as easily and quickly as possible, while sort of ignoring the inner city areas that represent so many of the stations, especially on the south side of the city.
So one of the things that we discovered as we looked at transit opportunities across the county is that people in our south suburbs had the longest commutes of anybody in the region.
93% of residents on the south side of Chicago identify as Black. Thanks to advocacy from the Metro Electric Coalition, Cook County is funding fare reductions to make the Metro Electric line more affordable.
Our Fair Transit Pilot is a 3-year program in which we've invested more than $30 million. We reduced the fares on Metro Electric and Rock Island lines to CTA fares, which is $2.50.
Cook County recognized that Black residents were being left behind and directed money towards a targeted fare relief program. Another legacy of suburbanization and white flight from cities is aggressive policing on transit.
Many of the social problems that we're dealing with in cities have become concentrated in sites of public transportation.
Since the 1990s, many transit agencies have relied on a form of policing known as broken windows to maintain order within their systems.
So what happens is transit police, now they look for the broken windows equivalent on public transit systems. What does that look like? That looks like graffiti. That looks like fare evasions.
They have this kind of zero tolerance mindset, and this has driven huge numbers of people into the criminal justice system.
Studies from across the country have shown that fare enforcement disproportionately targets Black and brown riders, and that people of color face harsher penalties when they are stopped. Some transit systems are taking steps to reduce discrimination in policing. After a BART police officer killed Oscar Grant in 2009, the agency has made major policing reforms.
What we have done is look back, not only at the data, but the ways in which we've policed poor people, the ways that we have policed fare evaders, the ways in which that we have responded to crimes.
Taking an honest look at the data, BART found that Black men were being disproportionately stopped on their system. And as of 2018, 60% of BART police use of force incidents involved Black riders, despite the fact that only 10% of the system's riders are Black. In 2020, BART launched an unarmed ambassador program to reduce the number of police stops and increase referrals to social services.
These ambassadors and the additional social work staff are going to be on our trains with referrals, right? And not guns.
Creating a unit dedicated to addressing quality of life offenses frees up police officers' time to focus on preventing and addressing violent crime. Confronting the legacy of racism involves acknowledging past mistakes.
It is an absolute must that transit agencies do acknowledge decisions that they've made in the past that have harmed their riders.
One of the most harmful functions of racism is erasure. So if we're unwilling to talk about it, we are actively participating in the erasure of the negative experiences that folks are having as a result of racism.
It also entails investing in programs designed to close gaps in outcomes for Black and brown riders.
Commuter rail agencies and transit agencies writ large, really have to look at how they can repair damage that's been done in the past. And it really is through affirmative investments. It is through putting money behind all of the talk of equity.
Transit decision makers must acknowledge that the status quo is inequitable.
We just need to realize all of this is happening on top of a history in which racism has been a big part. We need to see how we can affirmatively undo some of that past and current racism by making better decisions and running better transit systems.
Eliminating racism in transit isn't about calling out individuals. It's about identifying and disrupting the mechanisms that perpetuate existing disparities.
We cannot decouple our past from our present. But what we can do is identify these mechanisms in a way that empowers everybody at the table.
If we get it right, we will have transit systems that can really benefit everybody.
Hard work, but totally possible.
Thank you for your attention. I know it's a long video, but I thought it was necessary to, create context about the work we're doing. So part of the feedback we received so far is that, our statement needs to include groups like, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, women, older adults, people with disabilities, commonly, grouped in underserved populations in our region. acknowledge inequities, recognize work well done, and as you saw in the video, the Better Bus Stop program at Metro Transit has been highlighted as a great action to address inequities, and it has positive results after we looked at data and created opportunities to correct what it was wrong, and include strong commitment and responsibility to equity work. So that's what we have received so far. And I really, like I said, I like, the last remaining minutes that I have in my presentation to hear you and, discuss around these questions that I like to ask you as a committee. The first question is, how can we improve the process to achieve a shared statement? After I presented, what are opportunities to improve that process? Are there additional resources or community assets that need to be tapped as part of this work? And what are other considerations as we collectively engage in adopting a shared statement? And of course, if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. But I'd love to hear from you. So I don't know if Councilmember Gonzalez or Chair Leah, you have questions or you'd like to facilitate the discussion.
I'm just going to say briefly that I really enjoyed that video, and it really touched on all the areas that need to be addressed. And it showed the L line there in Chicago on the south side. I've taken that line many times when I had relatives living in Chicago. I used to visit them. And the stops in what they call Brownsville and other areas of the south side, they're always, when I was visiting Chicago consistently in the late 80s, early 90s, you can tell the difference between the level of service in those stations compared to other stops along the line. So it's definitely a working process in Chicago, but I'm glad that they are dealing with it now, just as we should be doing it now here at the Met Council with our own transportation services.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. I think that the video is a great compilation of things that are going right now in terms of other agencies tackling, systemic racism and, looking at data and correcting harm. So thank you. Yeah.
And I really appreciated how the video highlighted that those inequities cluster around 3 areas, around amenities, services, and policing. I thought that was a really helpful framework to think through what are the opportunities for increasing equity moving forward. So I also appreciate the work you've done and the study that you're doing and the learning, and appreciate how the video highlights some of the frameworks you can bring into it.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Edward.
Go ahead,
Edward. Video too. I love the video too. I thought it was actually tied everything together, most everything together. I won't say everything. But I couldn't help to notice the amount of money being invested, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars even locally. So I would be remiss to say a fourth element of that is how does those monies that get invested are fairly utilized to expand access and opportunity. We work on that through one of our committees, and so the extent to which that can also be integrated and considered as an equity value would, I think, add a lot of value to it, because, we talk poverty areas, and then there's that huge dollar investment that's coming in as who's benefiting from that, both internally as workers, externally as vendors that get to intersect with transit, and how protected group members are being utilized in all facets of those opportunities. That was the thing that jumped out to me, and maybe is a additional resource that could be considered.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Edward. I think that, I guess I'm happy to say that our strategic plan includes what you just named, the expansion of, our system, including capital investments and, how we use our financial resources, as well as, the goal number 5, which is Metro Transit being a place where we have a great workforce and a place to build a career, because those are also internal investments. And I think that the service, the safety, and the amenities, is part of our, strategic plan, and it all has to be done with, equity lenses. And thank you for bringing that point up, because, how we utilize MCOP's businesses, how we invest, and the way we allocate resources needs to be done with, equity in, at the forefront. And my hope, and I think it's a hope of Metro Transit leadership, is that our shared definition or statement around transit equity can lead into the development of those tools that will really tackle decision-making, investments, and how, our capital projects get decided and be, analyzed under the lenses of equity. So thank you for bringing that up. That's the goal and the hope of, the work after adopting a transit equity share statement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I can just add quickly to that, and that's part of what we've been discussing at the council level, is how to integrate all these different moving parts. So it's not just making sure that the routes serve all the communities, but just like Celina and Edward mentioned, that the contractors are diverse, that the workforce is diverse, that folks in the workforce are promoted equitably. So it's different perspectives that need to be part of this. So if we just focus on the technical issues of miles of rail or of how many bus stops we have, we're missing like 2/3 of what needs to be done. And I'm just saying that is in the radar, and that has been discussed and continues to be discussed. All the ramifications that go beyond, just the hardware of the transit system itself. So hopefully we can continue with that and have, that comprehensive approach in place.
I see Nicole, you have your hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Martina. That was an awesome video. I really, really enjoyed it. It was holistic. It dealt with the root issues of how communities are impacted, and the systems that impact transportation, policing, economy, all that. And so I also appreciated the feedback, that you acknowledged the feedback and just the acknowledgement of the history that's tied in with that, because it's really foundational to really get into the root of the issue. And so I just want to say, great video. I also wanted to say, is the engagement ongoing, as you assess and keep going, that'll continue to be ongoing? And that was my only question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, as I shared in the timeline, we began this process with the drafting and really doing literature review. We are now collecting input and feedback, and we'll propose the final draft to leadership. And I hope, I talked to Lila already to come back to this group, but the engagement and the listening will be ongoing as we continue to train, do info sessions, and hear and listen about the relevancy of that statement. We know, again, I always say what we knew about equity 10 years ago has evolved. We know more. We know how to, do better this work. So I think it's important that we are open to say that the shared statement will be guiding the work for the development of the tools, etc., but open to know that it may be revised, it may be reviewed because we know something new and we haven't, we remain open to learning. So yes, the engagement will be ongoing as well as the training and ensuring that people know about a shared statement and they have a voice and they feel reflected in that statement.
Hi, this is Edward again. Oh,
yes.
Brianna, I'm sorry. Brianna's hands up first.
Go ahead, Edward.
No, I just wanted to say there are some grassroots organizations, you may have talked to many of these. The Metropolitan Alliance for, well, I can't think of the name now, but Maura Brown and organizations like that are working on, and have been for a long time, on this transit stuff. One of the key legislators that work with those grassroots organizations is Representative Hornstein. He might be a good source to just talk to about who else is in the community. On the worker side, I know back with the Green Line being developed and groups like Summit Academy, OIC, and the workforce that they train, they're looking for opportunities on rail expansion. Other organizations that work or have committees associated with them is the MICA, which is the Affordable Housing Coalition, which has a lot of its volunteers that work on transit and housing, affordable housing issues. They can be incredible sources to contact to get a real grassroots and organizational perspective working with low-income communities.
Thank you, Edward.
Brianne, would you like to go?
Sure. Hi. Thank you. My question isn't, or comment isn't related so much to the process to develop it, but just once it's developed, deploying it. And one of the things I've noticed is that it seems like a lot of decisions are made at the middle of the organization, which is probably true, definitely true for all organizations, but the leadership is talked about a lot. The council members talk about equity. They're very, I feel, committed to equity. The directors are probably getting a lot of information. But in between where all the decisions are made, sometimes I feel that there's a gap there. And so as you think about this shared statement and how it applies to a project or a project decision or a policy decision, really really getting rooted in those middle folks who are day in and day out tasked with implementing it all and frankly coming up with new policies and programs. And I think about, just using a giant example, the Blue Line LRT extension, right? There's a huge discussion right now around selecting the route and how equity plays into that and what that means. And so just thinking about how to insert the statement and the EOE or OEO or the your role into those middle decisions that get made that are really where things get driven. So that's been my reflection in the 9 months or so that I've been on this committee, just senior leadership on board, directors on board, but as you kind of get down in the organization where all the decisions are actually made, or all the meat, what is the right term? I was going to use some cliche, but where all that work is done, how do we drill down? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that is about, the intentionality and the transparency to, it takes work to listen and try to reach and do in-reach and outreach to, more voices. And during COVID, we have additional barriers and, challenges to sort out as we try to hear directly from operators or from, I presented directly to the police academy. I'm looking forward to meet the, incoming CSOs. So I think that, it takes intentionality and really leadership support to ensure that this process gets to, more voices and really getting not only leadership buy-in, but how can we consistently implement, as you said, leading the further development of tools that will be more important than the statement itself, because it will lead to actions. Thank you.
I just have one last comment.
Yeah.
I find these interesting, and I'm not trying to make this a criticism, but the federal government just appropriated $1.7 trillion in transportation infrastructure money. And as I've said on EAC, it seemed like while the money is coming down the pipeline and about to be dispersed to get work done, we are planning equity and inclusion. And is, maybe this is for the future, but if this doesn't exist now, how do those protected group communities benefit from what we're planning for them to do? And having enough experience in this system, entities like Met Council and state government and other municipal bodies that dabble in federal funds only have to show that they are engaging the community in conversations and discussions around how do we get this done. But at the end of the day, if none of this facilitates inclusive participation or equity, it's just the same old game. Engage those who should benefit from this in the broadest, most holistic sense of what you're trying to achieve here. And the money's already in the system and being passed out to other folks. And that's what this feels like. And maybe I'm wrong in that regard, but in a couple of months, that money will come down. In February, the state will start deliberations and this bonding bill for another $2-3 billion. We're sitting on essentially $8 billion surplus, which a lot of that will be diverted to transportation, but yet still we're planning how we're going to be inclusive and how quote unquote BIPOC people will be utilized, and nothing will be planned until way after those dollars are out there and being spent. And there's obviously, if they're being spent, there's already a plan for how the rails are going to be laid, how the buses are going to travel, and all those things, and all of this equity and inclusion that we would like to see or in writing about, and we'll put in a nice plan. We'll miss the mark at least on those funds. And it seemed like we'll be back at the drawing table when the next time they're going to deliberate about allocating funds for some things. So maybe I'm wrong by that. If you can just clarify for me the timing on this, that I can't get out of my head these billions of dollars that are out here right now, and we're writing the plan.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question, Edward. And I think it's a great question. I just want to make sure that I clarify that, the work of equity and inclusion did not start with this, with the strategic plan, neither with my position or my leadership in this exercise or this activity. Metro Transit has been using, equity lenses, using tools to evaluate service changes, to evaluate capital improvements, even budget decisions. We are using best practices for hiring. So I don't think, we have not used equity and inclusion lenses to make decisions and to move our work forward before we started with this adopting a shared understanding. What I hope this adopting a shared statement of transit equity, what I hope it will do is create consistency and continue to, as we evaluate and continue to assess, what we are doing is creating the impact we intended to have or not. I think that having a statement that guides to consistent tools and practices, equity practices, is going to get us to the result we intend. And as you noted, as we continue to receive funds for capital investments or other investments in our transit system, having a shared understanding of transit equity, we hope that we'll continue to impact positively those that have been historically left outside the decision making, or we have not shared power with, or been negatively impacted. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear that the equity and inclusion work did not start with this, started prior to this. This is just knowing from best practices and publications that is a step we need to take to have a more collective and shared knowledge about what we mean when we say transit equity at Metro Transit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brianna, I see that you still have your hand up. Is that from before, or you have a new question?
Yes, thank you. No further comments.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Celina, for taking the time for being here with us tonight and for sharing this information. And this conversation will be ongoing, and we'll definitely invite you to come again before the EAC as this process goes forward. So thank you.
And I appreciate your advice and input, and I'll stay connected. And I hope to see you soon as we move this work along. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Happy holidays. Yeah, thank you.
For the next part of our agenda, we are going to give an update that was partially passed along by Anita, who's not able to be here, and Francisco is going to share a little bit of it. So I will pause and let Francisco do that.
Yes, thank you. And Anita Urvina wanted to share information about the Metro Transit Police Work Group, and she provided some slides and additional information about the engagement process that the work group is doing right now. And I believe everybody was emailed that. Is that correct?
I don't think it went to everybody, but we can forward it to everybody after the meeting.
Yeah,
and like you can share my screen if you'd like to share any of it.
Well, it's what she provided is basically where the process is and the engagement that they have done. And I just thought of adding some of my perspectives from what I've seen and heard on the presentations done by um, the staff and the chair of the Metro Transit Policy Work Group, Councilmember Chambliss, on on the purpose of this and the feedback that they have received so far, and the issues that are being shaped up that we're finding out as we engage in this process. So, just briefly, the work group was created just to address all issues related to the police, from training, equipment, interactions with the community, needs of the users, etc. So wide range, very open discussion on how to improve overall the work of the transit police department. And I just wanted to mention two of the issues that I found more interesting in the partial information that has been shared with us. Number one, that many of the writers that responded to the surveys have uh, concerns about safety, and safety in the sense of having a safe environment and a good environment for the use of the train. So most of the complaints that or concerns shared by riders were related to issues like uh, people intoxicated on our trains and buses, people playing loud music, people using foul language, um, things of that livability issues such as those, as opposed to violent crime. I mean, that also is a concern, but as far as I could see from the comments from the users, is those livability issues that are serious too, that seems to concern folks. Uh, and some of the discussions that we're having at the council level is, you don't need a fully armed, trained police officer to address a complaint about loud music, right? So we're trying to find ways to address the particular concerns in a measured way that doesn't escalate the situation and that frankly does not need some of the other tools that we have. I mean, the transit police is already busy. The police will be busy enough trying to address the more serious crimes like, burglaries, not burglaries, assaults and robberies and things like that, pickpockets that do happen in our line. So who should address those other liabilities issues is a conversation that is ongoing. And the other comment that I heard that was interesting was that in a survey of the police officers on our transit police force, about 40% of the officers that answered the survey indicated that they don't feel supported by management and by the council. And a lot of that lack of support was related to they feel that they don't have the equipment, the tools, the training, etc., to really do their work. One thing that the council is determined to do is provide those tools and make sure that on the one hand we hire the best possible recruits, the most professional folks to join our force, but also if we do that, we need to provide them the tools to do their work effectively. So those are the two areas that struck me and that I think will be at the forefront of the next steps that the council will be doing as far as improving our safety. Again, the liability issues and also providing the officers the tools that they need to do their job. So thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. Next on our agenda, we want to discuss some EAC business, and I thought Francisco and I could give a little bit of an update about our candidates for new EAC members. And then, as I mentioned earlier in our meeting, the Operations Subcommittee has an idea that we'd like to gather input on. So we'll start with the screening interviews. I participated along with Chai, Lee, Anita, and Francisco in interviews last week and 2 weeks before that of candidates. And we've recommended a slate of 8 or 9 candidates that I have to check my notes to get my count right, that we forwarded to the Met Council for approval. As of this week, all of those candidates have received congratulation emails from Chair Zelli. And so we'll now move forward into the onboarding process, the formalization of their nomination and onboarding process, with the hope that they will be onboarded in either January or February. Members of the interview committee, which I think on with us are T and Francisco, do you have anything to add about the process or the people that applied and that we've forwarded as our slate?
This is T. I thought the process was a good process that we came up with. And I thought the questions were good. And I was pleasantly surprised at how excited the candidates were to be interviewed and how they found out about the EAC.
Lila, I see you have your hand up. What would you like to add?
I just wanted to just share that the email was sent out from Katie, and the acknowledgement. So Chair Zelli acknowledged the candidates, and then Katie sent out the email. So I just wanted to make sure that that was shared. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just briefly that I think that the folks that applied and that were selected will complement the folks that we already have in the council. I like some of the individuals. I think that will bring new perspective or different perspectives, I should say, to the EAC. And I like the fact that we have many folks from the community that weren't really professionals on any of the fields that you might think that are like relevant to this work, such as planning or government work, that they will be part of the EAC, and then they will bring their perspectives. I think that will be a nice complement to the folks that we already have.
Mm-hmm. I agree. We had a couple, we had people from a wide variety of backgrounds. We have had someone who has been just recently a community organizer and is fairly new to their work. We've had people that have been doing community-based work for a long time from all over the region. And as Francisco said, from a wide variety of backgrounds, and really looking forward to how that enriches our discussions at our meeting. One other thing to add is that most of the candidates that we interviewed this time were for at-large positions, because this is every other year a different type of EAC member is up for renewal. So in this year, the type of EAC member that we're onboarding primarily is at-large positions, and then filling a couple vacancies for our district positions, who will fulfill the remainder of the term of the district positions. Those positions are next up in 2024. So thank you all for any work you did at finding candidates, recommending people apply for the EAC, sharing with your networks. We got some really, really great applicants this year.
Great.
Next, yeah, thank you. The next thing I want to do is to bring forward that agenda item from the operations subcommittee. So as I mentioned a little earlier, one of the things that we are considering doing is bringing together businesses, members of the business community, organizations, and people with inside the Met Council to get to know each other in the hopes of really increasing some of the contracting practices that go to some of our protected class businesses that are owned by protected class individuals. And so we had a couple questions that we wanted to bring forward to this committee. The first is, in a get together like that, what kinds of topics or content would you recommend that we bring forward and make sure is covered? If you think people are getting to know each other, what types of things do you think that they would have to learn about each other in order for something like that to be successful? We're looking for input. Go ahead, Brianne.
Real opportunities and a connection of decision makers with folks. So like I referred to before, not the department directors or the OEO people, the people who are actually going to be making the decisions, the procurement decisions. And that is a very difficult thing to map. But I would say those two things, real opportunities. So, having your middle managers brainstorm what things they're going to be seeking vendors for in the next 6 months or year, list them out before the meet and greet or the meeting. And then the connection directly with the people who are running the process and facilitates, not always making the decision, but facilitating the review committee or facilitating the recommendation to the Met Council, those middle decision makers who maybe don't even know they're the decision makers, but they are. So that's what I would say, the two minimum requirements, like real opportunities in the next few months, and then direct connection with those who are the most influential over the decision.
Great. Edward, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Bree on that. I think those are real important. Go back to the survey that was done by EO office that pointed out that people did not know where to find the opportunities. Somehow making sure that answer is provided. And there might have been a second response that was up there that we could possibly add to that discussion.
Right.
So yeah, those two things from the survey, somehow if we can integrate the answer to those questions in a session like this. And then I know we'll do things like an overview of the Met Council itself and what its role is and those kind of things to open it all up so that people have a better understanding of the Met Council role and the work that it does. That would be important. And, the more detail people can provide in terms of utilization benchmarks that they have for protected group members, so that they have a sense of the opportunity that is available for them if they're actively engaged, I think could be a motivating thing for folks that may attend this.
Great. Brianne, do you have your hand up? Did you have another thought?
No, sorry.
That's okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts or reflections about content or topics that would be helpful to have at a get to know you event? Brianne mentioned decision makers as one group, people who make those procurement decisions as one group that should be there. Who else do you think would be helpful to have at the meetings, either from the business community or from inside Met Council? Who comes to mind when you think about something like this?
I'll just jump in and say, you know, I think sometimes these events, they're all theoretical. So if you have real projects, then the target market would be, or the target audience would be consultants or contractors or vendors who are going to be responding to those or capable of responding to those based on industry. So for example, you might invite businesses who are in that. I mean, that's very difficult. That's the problem with this, is it's very difficult to determine what the opportunities are. I don't know why it's so hard, but it is. And then the specific group to invite who would respond to those. But I think you could end up with a bunch of vendors who have nothing to do with the opportunities that are available, and then it's a waste of everyone's time. So that matching has to be done kind of ahead of time, or the recruitment of small businesses of color has to be targeted to those opportunities.
And Edward, I see you have your hand up too. What else would you like to add?
Yeah, in terms of groups to be invited, there are almost all of the ethnic communities and the white community as a chamber of commerce, and they have a diverse membership base that probably people that work in all of the 30 contracting areas. There are a plethora of organizations that are assisting individuals with employment opportunities. You know, like I mentioned, Summit Academy, there is RISE, there is the Exchange, there is a ton of organizations that are working with individuals that are looking for employment opportunities as workers on contracts or employees, employment opportunities with the Met Council itself. But yeah, the ethnic communities, I believe all of them have a Chamber of Commerce. Then there are groups like the National Association of Minority Contractors, Association of Women General Contractors, Association of General Contractors. There is the trades and a few others that, you know, I can put a list together of ones that come off the top of my head, send it to you, that would probably be interested in attending a meeting like this.
Thank you. Great. Thanks for the input, everybody. T or Nicole or Mohammed, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I agree with Bree and Edward and what they've said, and I've liked what they've said. So I think if Edward could put that list together and send it to you guys, that could be a start.
Madam Chair, no, I have nothing to add. I think everyone that's added thus far, I totally agree with. And I think the list is a great idea. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's one last area that we have kind of discussed at the council level, but I don't think that a concerted effort has been made, and this is on fostering the creation of potential vendors in the first place. Now, we can do all the outreach for existing to existing businesses to come and bid in our processes, but there's in some areas there aren't that many businesses that could even be able to bid in the first place. So one of the things that we've been discussing is how to encourage, facilitate, support folks that are thinking of starting a business and or those businesses that are just small or that aren't able to bid right now simply because they're not in a position to do so. Or how do we strengthen them and support them as they become able to then be bidders for contracts that we offer? And one thing that we suggested is not that the council itself will provide, I don't know, training on how to incorporate your business or capital of how to start your business, but connect folks to those opportunities and then work with those agencies that are many out there too that help entrepreneurs develop their business, have some type of connection that, you know, if folks complete their training course to become an entrepreneur and can secure the capital to get their business going, that we will make some space for them to bid on at least some projects to get your foot on the door, so to speak. So um, I'm speaking in generalities because that's as far as I know that we've gotten into this, but I think that's one area that we need to stress more. Is just creating those businesses or supporting those folks that want to create businesses in the first place so they can eventually develop and be strong enough that they can be bidders for our contracts.
Thank you, Francisco. Go ahead, Edward.
Yeah, just to add to that, there are organizations out there like African Development Solutions, Neighborhood Development Center, that receive support from the state to play that role in nurturing entrepreneurs from those communities. And they produce a lot of, you know, small businesses. If there's a way in a gathering like this or one in the future where there were, as Bree was saying, some targeted effort by the Met Council to tap into those emerging business enterprises, that would be great. Give them some ideas of who they should be recruiting from the community to start enterprising in that area, because there would be a lot of opportunities. But I also just want to point out that on the federal law, state law, and in the most recent disparity reports on the Met Council and all the other participating subunits of state government, in the Kin report, it talked about unbundling contracts so that they are not too large for emerging and even newer business enterprises to be locked out of contracting opportunities. Everything about equal opportunity laws is geared toward making sure everyone is included, regardless of how small they are. If there's a community that doesn't have a business enterprise in a particular area or any area that is being contracted by the entity, there is also a responsibility for the entity to help with nurturing enterprises in that area. And that's why groups like NDC get money from DEED in order to help with nurturing business enterprises, so all communities are included in the use of the money that they invest in our government. So with that being said, there should never be a governmental entity that doesn't include everyone in contracting opportunities. The contract should never be too big so they can't do it, and there are mechanisms for unbundling contracts so they can do it. And if they don't have broad inclusion, then they should be providing resources to entities like that or creating entities to start those kind of enterprises in all of those communities, so we all participate. If that makes sense to everyone.
Thank you. Brianne, did you want to add more?
Yeah, just one final comment is I actually think there are plenty of businesses out there. It depends on the field. Certainly there are some that are more well represented, but one of the things in my day job that I've realized is that small businesses are out there hustling. They're not looking at how they can get registered as a DBE with the Met Council. They are extremely lean and abundant. We discovered 150 small businesses in our community during the CARES Act business subsidy that we didn't even know existed, working out of their homes, hustling. So like, I do think that they're out there. Maybe they don't have a lot of employees yet and could definitely benefit from mentorship and encouragement, but they're already LLCs, they're already making income. Whether or not they're capable of taking a Met Council contract, is a question, but they exist and they're just under the radar because they're trying to run their business. So, and often they're trying to run their business as a side job to the job that pays their bills until they can get the big contract or the big win. And so I just wanted to share that reflection because I think they're all out there. It's just a matter of connecting with them.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, my last comment on this. Dr. Bruce Corey at Concordia College has been a person who has looked at this across all of the protected group communities and have assembled a report. He might even be somebody that would be good to bring here to talk about the number of what he called the Celina community, how many exist within the metropolitan area as well as in the state of Minnesota, what their revenues are, how much they contribute to local and state taxes. He can break that down by each community and how many. I think in the latest report I read of his, that sector is the fastest growing in terms of small businesses in the state. So, and all of the disparity reports report that there is more than enough willing, able, and available contractors in all of those communities to meet the utilization benchmarks that would be set by our municipalities, the state, and the Met Council. So they're there. It's a matter of making the connection to them. And I think, like Bree said, maybe not all of them have the capacity to do contracts the way they are packaged by the Met Council, but then the Met Council has an obligation to unbundle those so that they can afford them an opportunity to do it. So, but I think starting with them getting to know that, and I think a person who should be on the agenda just to talk generally about that segment of the community should be Dr. Bruce Corey. He's done some incredible studies and work on all of the protected group communities, small business capacity and business capacity.
Thank you. I think we'll wrap up this agenda item. And Francisco, I'm not remembering any other EAC business items that we wanted to cover for this agenda item. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Great. Should we move on to the next agenda item?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is reports from us members on the standing committees. And I think that Phil is not here, or Chai. Chai did share some information of what was discussed at the latest, one of the most recent management committee meetings, which was on the affirmative action plan developed by the council, and it actually touches on many of the issues that we have discussed today, and some of the benchmarks that we are developing as far as hiring, retention of folks in our workforce, hiring, retention, and promotion of our folks. And I'm just going to mention one particular aspect that I thought was interesting, and it's a finding from HR that we have a disproportionate number of people of color that are being separated or that resign from our positions, and we're trying to find out exactly why is that. And I don't have any answers. I don't think we have any data so far, but that's one of the areas that we're trying to find out how, because those are folks that at some point apply for a position because they were interested in it, went through the selection process, and they were found to have the skills that we needed. So something after they engaged on that whole process and they were onboarded, something happened that led to them being let go or separated from their position. So we need to find out what exactly is going on. And I think that was one of the more interesting steps that um, they're taking to figure out how to move forward with our workforce. But I will encourage folks to. I don't remember how much of that data is available for everyone as far as the affirmative action plan. Maybe Lila can share that information, but it's got some good information as to those steps that we're taking.
Madam Chair, just want to comment on that, if I may. The reports that I've looked at from the Met Council, and this is pretty uniform for all of the agencies, their affirmative action reports, and we may not be looking at the same thing. You probably have a lot more inside information than I do, but what they don't do in reporting utilization and underutilization is report on jobs that are considered part-time and temporary. And until you see the utilization and underutilization in part-time and temporary positions, and if protected group members are being tracked into those jobs, and which have a short-term existence, temporary jobs do, you don't know if it's a retention issue or not. And like I said, you may be looking at different information to know that those are folks who were hired full-time positions and left. But the data that I've been searching, I can't find, who's being tracked into temporary positions, short-term jobs, but there is a high non-retention rate for protected group members. So the data right now would give you the impression that everybody that's being hired is going into a full-time position at the Met Council, when that may not be the fact. And some of these systems, and not saying the Met Council is that way, when we've gone in and audited the administrative application of affirmative action provisions, what we have discovered is that the preferred employees in temporary jobs are protected group members. And we also then discovered that there is the appearance of retention issues when in fact they're only hired for a short period of time and the position was going to terminate. So you may, if you don't have that information, I would say dig a little bit further to determine if the hiring authorities are feeling more comfortable when it comes to protected group members to put them in a temporary position versus a permanent one. Or are they enforcing the 6-month provision around probation more stringently toward protected group members than they would other folks who are hired? And that can be where you're seeing the problem, where it appears that people are leaving the positions voluntarily or quitting, when in fact the intent when they was hired was not to necessarily keep them there permanent in the first place.
My understanding, and that's a great point. I don't recall seeing that data disaggregated between full-time versus part-time or temporary positions, but what I was referring to, I think it was just folks that were hired permanently and that were separated, involuntarily separated from their positions. So yes, and that was the initial finding, and is that those folks tend to be mostly people of color, and what they were trying to figure out is the reasons why. For example, like, is it because they're treated or discipline is harsher on them? I think that's one of the issues that they're looking, but I think that process is ongoing. I don't recall seeing any findings yet.
And one of the things that Councilmember Lee's email had in it was some links to the materials that were shared at the management committee meeting. I'm going to drop just one of the links in the chat. I don't see the data disaggregated there either, although I do know we have Sai with us in the meeting, I believe. And if she wants to add anything, certainly you could, Sai.
Chair Goldstein, Moses, Chair Gonzalez, and committee members. This is Cy Jordan, Director of the Office of Equal Opportunity. The referred document from the recent management committee was a commitment of the Office of Equal Opportunity to report out on action that we have been taking since the published affirmative action plan for the 2018 through 2020 period of time. It is not the actual affirmative action plan. That is also available publicly and has been distributed directly to the EAC. We can certainly forward it again, that will have more detailed information. We've also discussed those numbers in quite a bit of detail at the subcommittee operations meeting, but we'll be happy to share that again with the full EAC at another committee meeting with prepared data and information. With regard to the current document, that defines the priority areas that we have laid out with our partnership with Human Resources. So we've certainly been doing quite a bit of work across the council in a number of ways through our different equity change teams, as well as through our ongoing work in the Office of Equal Opportunity, as well as the individual and collective work with Human Resources. Through all of that, we have our affirmative action plan, which lays out somewhere, I think the estimated number was about 43 corrective and other actions that we had committed to taking. What we have done is define those by themes and said that we are going to identify 11 priorities that we can be intentional about and focused on. And so that document identifies those priorities, but doesn't yet have all of the detail of the associated work. The presentation had some summaries of what that work is, and we'll certainly be continuing that conversation, and we'll be reporting again at the next quarterly meeting on that. And I hope that helps with some of the questions. If you have something more specific, I just wanted to lay out what that document is compared to what I'm hearing about the general discussion about disaggregated data.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Great. Well, as we wrap up our formal agenda items, I want to make space if any of our committee members have announcements or things that they'd like to share with each other. Let's take a few moments to do that now.
Well, I'd just like to say happy holidays to everybody and Merry Christmas for all those who celebrate. Merry Christmas. and just pulling for a greater 2022.
Can I just ask, are the names of the appointees in a packet somewhere or something, so we have an idea of who, or do we just wait patiently until January?
That is a good question that I can find out from Katie and follow up by email. Or maybe Lila knows.
I jump in here. Katie is actually in the process of getting all of that together, and she will forward it on to me. Once I receive that, then I'll send it to the committee.
Thank you, Lila.
Oh, I just also wanted to say happy holidays. I'll be transitioning because me and my husband will be relocating soon. So this has been a great experience for me, a learning experience. And it sounds like, a great foundation has been laid. Best of 2022. And it was great connecting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And then I too want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And my hope is that 2022 will be a great year.
Nicole, thank you for your service. We've appreciated having you on the committee. And likewise, I want to say thank you, everybody, for your service this year, for your commitment, for your really wise ideas. There hasn't been a meeting that's gone by that I haven't learned something new or gained a new idea. And I also really appreciate feedback people shared with me before, after, during meetings. I've learned a lot and have really enjoyed serving as co-chair of this committee. So thank you. I'm looking forward to a really productive and fruitful and meaningful 2022 with you all.
All right. I don't think we can top that last declaration by Leah. So I think we can call the meeting adjourned at this time.
Yeah. Have a safe holiday, everybody, and we'll see you in 2022.
Excellent.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Bye.